Well, hello there, and welcome back to Fabulous Folklore Presents with me, your host, Icy Sedgwick. I'm joined this time by Bulgarian writer-director George Popov, the creator behind Hex and Droving, which explored the folk horror genre and have been praised for their focus on complex themes and characters. His recent venture into documentaries with the Sideworld series has also seen George take on the role of narrator, guiding audiences through a trove of gothic ghost stories, folklore, mythology, and lesser-known paranormal experiences. I hope you enjoy this conversation about folklore filmmaking and haunted villages. So, welcome to Fabulous Folklore.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
I wanted to kick off with my first question because obviously that's how interviews traditionally work. And you've done, is it 3 documentaries now?
Yes.
And they've all got the heading of like Sideworld. So could you explain what your kind of concept of Sideworld is?
Yes, Sideworld for us started as an idea to make these documentaries not only be a self-contained exploration of all the themes that we're going through, but because I am and Jonathan Russell, who I work with in Rubicon Films, like we've started, we're still making our narrative feature films that are stories that we write and films that we're making. And we just found out that there was a lot of a lot of factual legends from history, and there is a lot of what's real and what isn't in terms of where the legends come from. And we want to explore all of that, but if you wanted to make a film for each story, that will be 100 of them, and we'll never be able to do that. And we have to concentrate on the stuff that we really want to commit 2 years per film, but so we wanted to explore that as much as possible, when we thought that like a documentary series of feature documentary films may be an interesting way to do that. And I thought it needed a unifying sort of a brand, to put it in the more boring way, I guess, but really as a keyword that sort of explains the type of stories and the mood that really want to go into, because I really want it to be something that has a lot of atmosphere to it, unlike some of the more other regular documentaries.
Cool. So what actually got you started then in working with folklore as a filmmaker? I know you've just sort of said there about the idea that you want to explore these things more deeply, but sort of what kind of first caught your attention about it?
I think folklore is just it's a combination of a lot of passions that I have, and that's what I like about it, because it's a mixture of a lot of real interests in sciences and subject. I mean, you have history on one end, which you can't go without, and I've always been really interested in history, both Europe and around the world, and then the same to me have fairy tales and fiction, and that was a big part of my childhood, like reading like Brothers Grimm, like dark fairy tales and all that kind of stuff, and also I was into paranormal things and X-Files and cryptids and ghosts and all that kind of stuff. And while at the same time was starting to develop my interest into storytelling, and which eventually became a filmmaking passion. So when you combine all of that and you see folklore as all these stories that are verbally passed down through the generations, it was just inevitable that all of these paths will cross into it's a sort of an interest of where does the folklore end and history begin, and where the factual and the fictional. And at the end of the day, it's like, to me, it was always, is the story interesting first, and then is it true or not, then, and where does the kind of the core of it come from? That even though it's secondary, that's the rabbit hole that we all want to kind of explore, and that's always it's very fun, and I find it a uniting way through people from all around the world to really kind of get into, like, oh, that's your folklore, that's from that place, from it's there, it's I think it's a great way to share stories.
Yeah, because I think that's primarily the thing, because I was going to ask how you sort of define folklore as a concept, but I think because you've said a lot there about sort of storytelling and so on, do you see folklore as kind of a way of holding all the stories together, or do you think that the stories are kind of like the law in and of themselves?
I think so. I mean, it's all of the above, really. But I think what's really precious to it is that it captures a lot of the time of where it originated from, but at the same time, every generation after that adds something from their time. So it's almost like it's a collection of mementos from every period, and we keep adding to it, like all the way up to modern folklore, urban legends, and everything. That still a lot of it is inspired by stuff that is being passed down for for thousands of years sometimes. And that's incredibly interesting to me. I mean, it's sometimes the what we call folklore and what's mythology, and what's works of just works of fiction where who the author is. Like, all of these kind of weave around each other, and I think that relationship is incredibly interesting, and because it holds a lot of mystery, yet it holds a lot of content of something to always chew on and discover and find, in both from a storytelling purpose and from a factual purpose.
What do you think sort of drives people to tell stories in the first place? Because it seems like no matter where you go in the world, people have stories. It's like a thing that we do. So what do you think is the drive behind that? I know that's a fairly big question.
It is. I think it's mainly personal, but also, yeah, it's something that we all share. I think it's just coping with the world, right? Like, it's just your whiff of copium that you need, every morning, like from the day when you had to hunt the mammoths, right? And you're chucking spears at it, hoping that you're gonna get it, unless your wife and child are gonna starve in the cave. Like, from then, it's like, well, let me at least tell you the story, right, of how we're gonna do it, and we're gonna do it on the as a drawing on the side of the cave. I don't know, but there is a lot of that, plus also wishing to explore and see what's the boundary of what's fictional, what isn't, trying to explain things, trying to that's why we mythologize things like lightning back in the day, and today's, like, other forces that we don't understand, and dark matter and ghosts and things that we talk about, where I believe with a lot of those things we're just using lingo that now sounds fantastical, but in the future would just be any other part of science. So I think it's just us trying to just find our way in the universe, and that's why I love stories, and I can't do without them, because it's therapy for us and for me. And I think we all need it, and that's why we can't get away with it. It's part escapism, but also it's escapism that's more introspective about who we are and what we do and why we do it.
Mm. So would you say that's why it's important to sort of preserve the old stories as well as create new ones?
100%. I think we need to know, like, where that legacy comes from and how all these stories have changed. I mean, a lot of them, mean one thing back then and mean another thing now, but also a lot of them are so forward thinking and are still as relevant today as they were back then. So it's like anything in history. I think it's important to know it, preserve it, understand it. If we don't like it, we'll be like, well, we'll make sure we don't do that again. And if we do like it, we'll be like, let's make sure we preserve that. You can't have a future unless you have a past. Like, it's not possible to do that. And there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot that's worth retelling in new ways, just like all these stories have been told. And there's other stuff that'll be like, well, that's been told 1,000 times. How can we tell something new? In both cases, you need a parallel. You need something to compare yourself to. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's incredibly important from storytelling perspective, and also from just when it's about stories from a particular place. It's just about that knowledge and people learning that, oh, I didn't know that this amazing story exists in Oman or Kazakhstan or Scotland, or and learning about all that. So yeah, I think it serves many purposes.
Yeah, I think that's the thing as well, like how there's been such a resurgence of interest in folklore over about the last almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
And I think people have sort of come to it with this idea of, oh my God, I'd always known this was a thing, but didn't realize it had a name almost. And do you think that people are searching for something in particular when they're then engaging with folklore, or do you think it's just like an inherent interest that people probably have?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that one, right? The resurgence of folklore, because I was even talking to Jonathan about that the other day. It's I was worried at some point, oh, is it just gonna be a fad, like something that is there for a couple of years, like genres in movies that kind of come in for a little bit, or fidget spinner, right, of interest, something like that. And but it's not only has stayed, but I think it's gaining more and more momentum in most medium, in books, in podcasts like yours, in film, a combination of folk mysteries, folk horrors, folk, like any sort of other relationship with genres, more interest in history. History from, like, I've definitely seen, I mean, I've done a lot of these with American podcasts, and their fascination with it, because it's not quite something that they quite have, so they find it incredibly exotic, and their folklore is very different, so they're coping with that. So I think, no, it's really exciting. Why it started, I think it's like when the pendulum swings too much to the other side, like with everything, and we're getting so modern, there's so many new things, and there's so much information about now, and about stuff that kind of you think matters, but it doesn't really. And someone, dressing up a certain way on TikTok or whatever, like, whatever the hell, I don't know. I think people are so, like, eventually they're going to be drawn towards where there's value, and there are stories that kind of matter. And I think, because there is this boom of information and of sharing, now we can unearth these things that, some years ago might have seemed kind of like dusty and nerdy, and sort of like belong to some sort of like cat lady librarian or something. But I think now that's become so cool, and where it always should be, combining into like how much also it means about now and the future, not just something that sort of should be forgotten in history. And I think have always known that. I think the amount of times we've told, like, Beauty and the Beast, folklore, old fairy tale, and how many times they're going to, but I think they're discovering how much more than just that there is, and where the origins are for. So, yeah, I don't know, but I think that's also what drives us all, and I think there is a community forming more and more so, and I really hope we keep it healthy.
So obviously we mentioned there about obviously being in different formats like books, podcasts, films, and so on. What do you think that, and this is probably sounds like an obvious question, but what do you think film offers as a format that sort of maybe books in particular don't? Is it sort of the fact that, that they can be a bit more passive, and that someone can sort of sit and watch it without having to directly engage, or does it just offer more creative possibilities, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like, film has always been, and that's the reason why I got interested into it. And I'll talk from both a narrative and documentarian perspective, because, like, I started from the narrative point of view, but it's always been the one that captures all senses and all arts, and kind of like puts it in one. I think only video games are sorry, one level above that, where it engages you even more on you have more input into it. But and that's why they've been so successful with stuff like fairy tales and so on and so forth, because you can really be in those worlds. But I think film, like, because you can get folk music, which is a big part of it, and then you can get like art of like old illustrations and paintings and everything, the riff on that, and you can take just the verbal stories, and when you put it in the same pot, that kind of what makes a successful film. So I've always been seeing it from that point of view, because I'm a bit greedy. I want a little bit of everything. I want the story, and the actors, and the music, and the art, and yeah, and put it all together, and that way kind of extract all the juices from everything folklore. I think that's what film does. And when we went into Sideworld, saying of, okay, what if we did something a bit more documentarian, I initially wasn't sure, because I've never really made documentary films. Cinema's always been kind of quite personal to me, and we've had like always this kind of, we write everything ourselves and then tell those stories. So I was like, well, can I do what other people like? Other people probably can do a great documentary about this. Do I want to do the same thing? And I think that's what also made it actually exciting after that for me. Be like, oh, actually, wait a second, we don't have to do it like other people. We can do it other way, and we can do documentaries that are a bit more, again, atmospheric, and you are going to be in the mood of just someone there telling you stories, and you're engaging with them, and you can just kind of gives you that mood of curling up with a hot drink under the blanket and engaging with those, quite sometimes sad or horrific or melancholic or just interesting stories, and kind of reliving it that way. And I think it gets closer to the sensation of someone just reading it from an old storybook than some documentaries that can be a little bit more on the drier side. And I'm not saying that also has its place, and there's a lot of people doing it great, but that's the way I think of what makes Sideworld, at least at this stage, and that we're trying to push more and more, that it feels like storytelling, even though we're giving you information about stuff that's been there in history.
I think as well, the other thing that I noticed, because obviously when I was watching your most recent one, Domination Village, it's like, I like the fact that you can sort of see where it is that you're talking about. And I know obviously like in a web article, for example, you can still include images and so on, but there's something different about sort of seeing like how the landscape moves and how this building connects with that building and how the thing sort of sits in place. Because I think in some ways, even though there's like a universal quality to folklore, a lot of the time you see like common stories across places, but you also have these places that are like really individual, and the place is so much a part of the folklore. So I really like being able to see where you were talking about, because I'm nosy. I like to see places anyway. And obviously, of the 3 villages that you've done, I'd been to Eam, but I hadn't been to the other 2. So it was so nice to be able to see how the place is connected and almost what it would be like to walk down the street there.
No,
and I
you're
think
right.
that
And
like brings the folklore alive.
it does, and it's a universal language as well. I mean, we had so many people from like I said, like from the States or from Sri Lanka, or like just saying like, oh, I've never heard of this place and I've never been to the UK, but that's amazing, I would love to go there. I've seen Hunt the Forest of England 3 times because I just wanted to be in those forests and explore that feeling. And for people that may or may not be able to go there, or they've never been, like as you said, like that's something so to them exotic and new and interesting, and it's kind of, you're sharing that local place with someone that might not be able to experience it at first hand. That's what I think, bringing everybody together for someone who is local and can go there is really like nostalgic and validating, and then for someone who's never seen it, is something inviting, and that brings the 2 cultures together.
So in Domination Village, obviously you did Pluckley, Prestbury and Eam. So what was it that drew you towards telling their story sort of particularly?
Well, yes, I mean, we I think that they provided a different sort of vibes of what really sometimes consists into making a haunted village, and obviously with Pluckley and with Prestbury, it was the question of, they were factually the most haunted. Like they were, Guinness Book of Records for Pluckley, and then Prestbury was kind of vying on that. Like it's such a small space. Like it had so many stories about. Also, I think we kind of had to do them if we're gonna do a. We wanted to keep it to 3 because we're in 70 minutes, our format, we don't want to go into too many places, because you're right, like we want to give you that sense of, you get to explore it at least for at least 20 minutes each one of them, and see how it feels. So it worked very nicely that they really had those kind of staple great ghost stories that made them so infamous into people who are from those interests, and they know about them. But at the same time, they really felt that they have their own atmosphere in terms of the types of stories we also picked from them. Pluckley had one vibe, and then Prestbury another one, and then Eam, that's why we kind of end on it, because it was in a completely different feeling, exploring the plague, and that's why we kind of told its story in a different way as well. So that helps keeping your film dynamic, because I can't help but think of it as if it's a fictional story, and to keep people interested, I think you need that variety in types of stories that you tell, and those moods that we go into. So yeah, I think it was from many angles. There's also some of them visual, in terms of what's the different texture of the villages and everything. But at the end of the day, kind of fit very well with those 3.
So do you have a favorite
I know this is a horrible question to ask, but do you have a favorite
Yeah.
story from each of the villages, or would it just be too difficult to pick?
It is too difficult to pick, but like I guess like every director, they always, it's either the last one or the next one, you know. But yeah, I'll have to cop out and probably say the last one that it was, which ends up being the story of Eam, I think, because there was people, like you said, you've been there. There's quite a lot of people who knew about it, but for us to do it in our format, that was a little bit something new for Sideworld in the third film, because we kind of say the village is amazingly haunted. Anyway, let's move on into why, right? And that's mainly what the story is about. We do talk about the paranormal angle, but that almost seems like we've done that quite a lot with the first two villages, because that was the main thing about them. But then the history and the heroism of people, the people of Eam, and the just the brutality of that story, just I felt like I never knew about this before. I've only kind of heard stuff, and I felt like the world needed to know about it, and it felt important, and it felt and it was a great experience filming there as well. I love the people of Eam when we were there. Everybody was, their sense of humor is just amazing, and like that combined with the plague stones and graves of whole families around you, it just, to me, so British and so welcoming and kind of like philosophical, you know, in terms of life. So it was yeah, very empowering, and both sad but uplifting. You know, there was this weird feeling about it, and quite a lot of people have said like, oh, you're, you know, I love all of your stuff, but I think the Eam story is one of the best, and how you did it. So I think that was quite successful.
I think the funny thing with watching it as well was, obviously, like, I knew the story of Eam, kind of how, you know, they isolated themselves from everyone sort of before the pandemic, and it was interesting how that was the thing that a lot of like news broadcasters kind of jumped on the back of during the pandemic. So do you think that the story still has anything to teach like contemporary audiences about ourselves as people, kind of after we've sort of come through our own version, or do you think that a lot of people just kind of went, yeah, that's a nice story, and then ignored it?
No, I think it does 100%. I think we said that earlier. Is we need a history to just give us context about how things have changed, how things happened, and how sometimes they need to, and how sometimes they don't need to, and just as a good reminder. And when you think how much more horrible that pandemic then was, then and how much that sacrifice meant so much more, and the resilience that the bulk of those people, maybe one and two or two didn't, but most of them to take up that sacrifice and say, no, we're not going to escape this, we're going to quarantine ourselves, and to keep everybody who's still alive and healthy, and pretty much know that's you know, your chance of survival just drops down considerably after that. How many people today will do that? And which, even within a nation, which nations today on earth like have that sense of honor and preservation to say like, yeah, we're like that, we'll do it? I don't know, Japanese maybe, I don't know. I don't know, but in the West, we're like, I don't know, like there's a lot of, there's a sense of like togetherness that we talk about, that we like to say we have, but then I always think like we're like one stupid decision away from Mad Max, and I wish that yeah, stories like that just keep getting told again and again, to be like, hey, look, like in so many ways we look at people back in the day for being a bit more, they were a lot more backward in a lot of ways, in the ways of thinking, in the ways of rationalizing things, but in sense of responsibility and how they save lives of pretty much the whole county around them, we have a lot to learn from them.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that you take from it. And it's, even though they didn't know why something was a good idea, like for example, like leaving the money in the vinegar and everything, it's almost like they still did the right thing.
Yeah.
Even if the what we would consider the scientific reasoning wasn't there. And I think that's what I've always like, it's kind of that community sense that
the intention was there. Yeah.
I have to ask though, when you went to these three different places, like, did anything weird happen while you were there?
I wouldn't say that much on this one, and not massively. I mean, sometimes we're so so busy and to try to take the shots or try to work with the weather or everything that even if there was a ghost right in front of me, I'd be like, can you just please move, because I need that house behind you. So that can happen. And on Haunted Forest, to be like the first one, I'll say that there was a couple of things when we were the story of the suicide pond in Essex. Well, in Epping Forest, actually. It's not in Essex, but it's close. I would say that there was a couple of those ponds that we went to that I kind of felt the hair on my back kind of stand up a little bit, and I don't usually do that. I don't think I'm quite that attuned as a lot of other people are, but I've been like, well, this kind of look with my cameraman and I'm like, this could be it, just felt different. So I've had like some of those, but weird than that, no, not really. I mean, filming in Pluckley was a bit weird. I the locals were quite different from the ones in Eam. I mean, they were still great and very, very helpful and everything, but I just felt there was a little bit more of a trying to put a distance between them and the world, and then that story. Like, if they kidnapped us and chopped us apart in like some basement, I wouldn't be too surprised. I'm joking, of course. It wasn't like that, but yeah, not really. And but I know quite a few people, like, for example, because Prestbury is not far from where I am right now, which is I'm in Cheltenham right now, so it's literally 20 minutes from here. Yeah, there's a lot of stories there that some of them we've put in, and some of them I know like at first hand, but I wouldn't say that I'm good, thankfully. Nothing. I don't think I brought any demons back.
Would you say as well, just thinking, I mean, like villages, particularly English ones, I think have quite a reputation like around the world. I mean, look at the fact that, in Midsummer Murders, the ITV crime drama, like hundreds of people seem to have died in this one county in these quaint little English villages. Is there something inherently weird about English villages that makes them feel like they're more likely to be haunted
Oh,
than,
yeah.
like a suburb?
Oh, 100%. I think it's because of that, and it's a good thing you brought Midsummer Murders, because I grew up in Bulgaria, and my grandma, she loved to watch Midsummer Murders, right? And that was her, and I was like, Grandma, and she like loved violence with such a kind of childish sort of, oh yeah, that's great, But I think it was the combination of that. It was the teacups and the quaint like yards and the Hamlets and everything, plus the murders that kind of made it, and that notion that there is something so kind of idyllic on face value, but then under it there's this whole like rotten darkness. I think that's so definitively British or even English that's it's appealing, and it's very exotic as a setting, and I think that made it through our kind of our fictional films as well, like definitely with the Droving to some degree. And that's part of my fascination with this country, and kind of every country has its own kind of interesting dichotomy like this, and I think for Britain that's definitely one of them. And I love dichotomies. I love contrast like this, and the contrast of something looking so nice, but then there is so much darkness in history and dead bodies that are there kind of buried in the backyards. I think yeah, there's a lot of really interesting heritage to it.
So do you think that, obviously you're probably biased on this one, but do you think this sort of technology makes it easier for us to like explore these haunted places and kind of record them, but then also to share them with other people?
Yeah, no, it does. And I think a lot of different people do it in a different way. I mean, I don't see myself as the guy who goes around the haunted pub and like, ghost, can you hear me, and then doing that. And I don't have, there's nothing wrong with that, especially the ones that are a bit more legit. And I've used to watch a bunch of them, and some of them are very entertaining, and some of them are quite really interesting where they go into the history. And we have a lot of paranormal fans that watch Sideworld, and I love all that part of it. But it's not something that I would particularly be very good at, or I don't think I'll be adding anything new to, the picture. I'm coming from more the filmmaking aspect of the storytelling aspect to it, and we incorporate a lot of that discussion into Sideworld, and that's what makes it that. But we're trying to grab equally from all parts. So yeah, the technology helps, and especially now that you can stream things, and that I'm even more interested in. Like, I'm more interested into, even not in the documentary format. So, but if someone is going ghost hunting, it's like, I want to see it on Twitch, live stream, them being there, and or on YouTube or something. Like, I think that part is very, because that's firsthand. That one doesn't need any artistic craft, just kind of gets in the way of the experience, right? So and maybe there's something within our whole Sideworld franchise. Maybe one day we'll do something that's just purely concentrated on that, without, like I said, any of my pretension getting in the way of the experience. But in terms of making the film together, I mean, that's we're still quite on those documentaries. We're still quite old school. You watch documentary film, you get exposed to the stories. But the fact that you can watch it on your platforms and you can just stream it again, it's everything is much easier. And I think we don't need any gatekeeping into, well, it's from Dusty Books, so it should stay in the Dusty Books, and if it's in anything else, then it's wrong, right? Like, we're kind of like trivializing it. I don't think that argument works, because, as we said ourselves, it starts from way back in the day. Technology has changed so many times, and it's been verbal, right? Like, we're talking about folklore is mainly stories. They're passed down verbally. Someone has written a lot of them down, thankfully, so we know them. But it's just whatever people can do to tell the story. I'm going to draw you a sketch of what I saw, and like, I'm going to tell you the story about a devil in a cavern, and I'm going to draw it, and I'm going to make it into a fairy tale, or I'm just going to tell you in the pub. So I think it should be absolutely everywhere, because that's just, folklore is about just people communicating with each other, telling stories. And today we do it in a certain way, and tomorrow we'll do it in another way. It should always adapt with that, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that about obviously things being in books and things obviously not being, because I suppose in some ways one of the problems that you have when you go back and you look at these like old books where people have collected folklore, you don't know what their agenda was and what they chose to collect and what they chose to ignore. Whereas now,
it's like the Bible.
Yeah, and like anyone can like set up a podcast, or anyone can then just share an experience on Instagram or whatever, that it's almost kind of democratized the sharing of those stories in a way.
Yes, absolutely. Like, you can always, it's very difficult to leave something out because of an agenda, or because of, oh, that's what fits then or there, or to make it political of the time. Back then, we're like, oh, we're going to tell it a certain way, and we're going to make this character the hero because I don't want to get beheaded, and so on and so forth. And this day and age as well. So I think it absolutely allows for freedom. And I think making more, it's not, I mean, books are great, and I think there should be more and more folklore books, like, again, adapting with what people are interested in. And I always love to go through them, and that's where we get a lot of our information for the documentaries. But it should be it should be in podcast Wikipedia pages, films, not short clips, big clips, all kinds, Twitch streams, everywhere. We should be talking about it on Twitter and in a very official academia as well. I think that's what makes it. It's all about humans anyway. So wherever humans go, I think that it should go with them.
Because I did wonder if one of the advantages that you've got with a documentary is if, say, somebody creates like a 30-second Instagram reel sharing a piece of folklore, you don't have the time or the space to kind of get into like the context of what was going on or the nuance or anything. Whereas at least with like sort of 70 minutes, you can sort of really dig into something and be a little bit more rounded, I guess is probably the word I'd go for.
Absolutely. I mean, and this is the reason why I like doing longer conversations like this on a podcast or something than what it used to be like the old format, which is like Sideworld's coming to your platform 9:30 and goodbye, thanks for having me. It's because you get to know a little bit more about what we're trying to do. It's a lot more editing, and I say it knowing that I'm a filmmaker. Editing is always there to tell you a lie, right? It's always tell you to edit something out. Don't forget that. Even when you watch a documentary, even when you watch our stuff, don't forget that it's there for a purpose. It's already made an opinion for you. So the longer and more kind of raw something is, the more truthful it is. And I think that's why it's important to have a good balance. But I think there's a place for everything. I mean, we've been quite enjoying on our Twitter account, for example, to post like just tweets of like one just a little story and to get people into it. But those are gateway kind of drugs into what Sideworld is and what like folklore is, and working on a lot of things in terms of YouTube channels and TikToks and everything, so on and so forth, in a way to be able to grab people from kind of outside the inner circle to make it even more and more popular. But I think that's how you get started. You get started with something that seems like, oh, that's cool, that's familiar, and you get latched onto that. But it's just, as you say, it's a little trailer for something that where if you give it a little bit more time and experience. And in this day and age of people binging, 8 hours of TV, sitting out to watch like 70 minutes, or just like, even if you binge all 3 Sideworlds we've done so far, that's probably like 3 hours and a half, you'll be fine. There's so much value to that, also in the way you experience it. It's like listening to a whole album of a band and just like the hit single that was on MTV. That shows how old I am. People used to watch stuff on MTV, but you know what I mean, like you see that single, you see that video, be like, oh, I really like them, and you go and buy the album and listen to the whole thing. So I think, again, there's places for both.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's the thing as well, when you sort of think about, like, because I sort of do like the little 30-second things, because sometimes something just needs 30 seconds. It doesn't need sort of like a 2-hour podcast episode or anything about it.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I really like, I've listened to a couple of them just so it can, kind of get in step with what you do for preparation for this. And I really like that you do these like 15-20 minutes of like, hey, here's this like really cool folklore tidbit, let's explore it, but let's after that go. And I think that was a huge reason why Sideworld ended being in those documentaries as well, because we didn't want to put fat on stories just for the sake of it. We're like, well, let's just group a bunch of them under a theme and just let's give them the format that they deserve.
So is Sideworld something that you see kind of becoming like a community thing where other people will then contribute things under the same banner, or do you think it'll very much just stay as the films that you make?
I answer like Winnie the Pooh, both, like both things. I think so. I think it should be, because it seems, I already have, we Rubicon Films, we do fiction films, and we'll keep doing those feature stuff that's like, here's another fucked up story that we came up with, do you like it? And that those are meant to be for that. I think when we went to start all the documentaries, I wanted to put as much as I've learned from directing fiction into it to make them better, in my opinion. But at the same time, I do love that sense of community. That's something that's different. There's a lot more conversation, because we're all talking about something that already exists. I didn't make it up. Like, that's something that's already there. So I really wish that we can keep making the documentaries better and better into ways of how they show what we're all about. But at the same time, that's what we want to see it as a, again, I'm using dirty words here, franchise. It's something that has a lot of branches. Then some of them will allow people to do more and more of a conversation and to be more of a community. I really feel that way. And because there's so many great places nowadays, like your amazing podcast, and like other creators, and like ones that are more pure history, or more pure horror, more pure just arts, macabre arts, or anything else, or paranormal, as we said, because they all weave in and out of folklore, right? That's to sort of bring them all together and do more and more in that space, and because I think there's just a lot of that people don't know about, that it's kind of like famous for a particular group of fans or people, and you just don't know that the other thing exists the same way it does in other communities and spaces, the way that comic book fans have that, or something. And I think that's a shame. I think for everybody who's interested in any of these areas, we can try to not be definitive or comprehensive in any way, but just be like one of the kind of the lighthouses that bring all the ships into the same same harbor.
When you said comic books, I just thought like a folklore MCU.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing is, it's like, why not? Because that's where it all comes from, right? When you really think about it, like a lot of when you trace things back, when you think about Marvel and DC and everything, and they're very inspired by things like commedia dell'arte and in Italian Renaissance, where everybody plays a character every single time and they come out, and he's gonna be the Harlequin, and he's gonna be Piero or whatever, and all these characters that you just come up with different stories every single time, so you don't have to buy a different outfit for your actor for every village that you go to, right? And they're iconic, and be like, I want to see the character. I don't care who plays them, but I just want to see the character again. And you go back and back, and you go back to mythology. And I mean, when you look, that's why Thor works so well, because when you go into mythology, they just seem like comic books. It's all about the character, and they're, so in mythology and folklore, they're like this. So I think, again, like, as I said, I think it's all the same thing. And I think a lot of the reason why comic books are still doing very well in terms of becoming this kind of mass media thing, and maybe they're not going to be on top forever, and they shouldn't. But I think the kind of the more subconscious appeal that it gives everyone is because people are more interested in these eternal kind of this eternal storytelling, this way of like stories that always matter, just told in a more modern way. So yeah, I think you're right on the money with that one.
Disney will no doubt be all over that.
We'll
So
see. Yeah.
you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Where can people find Sideworld then if they want to come and check out your documentaries?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the films themselves, here in the UK, on Amazon Prime, people can rent them and buy them if they like them that much, of course. And there's a few other platforms as well that you can very easily find Sideworld. All three films: Haunted Forests of England, Terrors of the Sea, and then Domination Village. A great way to learn everything about it is by following us on Twitter, which is at Sideworld UK. Or just our company, Rubicon Films UK. I'm there somewhere as well, at the George Popov. We have an Instagram as well, and same handles, and then also Facebook pages and stuff. But and then in all English-speaking territories around the world, hopefully, then in more other ones as well when everything gets translated. But in Americas, on some of the best ways to watch is on Tubi and Roku, because you can just stream it for free and maybe watch some ads. If you don't want to watch ads, just buy it. It's fine. But yeah, that's or you can just Google Sideworld and we'll be there somewhere.
Cool. I will put links in the show notes, because I know how sometimes it's just nice to just click on something and it takes you where you need to go.
Oh yeah. When someone does that in the podcast, I just tune out and I'll be like, I'm just gonna see where the link is. So yeah. So thank you. Absolutely.
All about accessibility here. But no, it's been really nice talking to you. Have you got any last final words about folklore that you'd like that to be the thing that a listener takes away?
Oh no, it has been really nice as well talking to you, and I think I mean it's a grand thing to say, but I'll it's actually it comes from that. It has been very nice talking to you, and I think that's what folklore and all of this is about. I love the way you carry a torch for the folklore audience, and that's something that is great, and we need a lot of those people like us, what we've been talking about in media and everything. And the way what we do is trying to unite that aspect with a lot of other interests as well, but it's a huge part of what we do. But also you need that kind of core audience attention to it. And I think the more we talk about from different levels of perspectives of interest and everything, the more we discover about folklore, different stories from I do really see it as one global world where every single little local place matters, but then all the borders in between don't really matter, right? Like it's like super local but super united. And I think that's if I can get cheesy, I think that's the future. And I think our type of fans, the people that we're like, and everybody else who enjoys the stuff that we enjoy, I think they think the same way. And I like you, we've been talking a lot about this conversation. I see a big future for it, and I think it's only going to get better, putting everybody under one hood, but kind of rejoicing in the diversity as well in the different stories, while enjoying the same passion. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's been really nice chatting to you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, in any time.
Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, feel free to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, because that helps other people find the show too. It also takes between 4 and 6 hours to research, write, record and edit these episodes, so if you want to help support my time in doing that, then you can buy me a coffee. Or you can join the Fabulous Folklore family on Patreon and enjoy extra benefits, including exclusive episodes and articles and even illustrated talks. All the links you need are below, and thanks in advance.